Awesome. Hello, everyone. So good to be on with y'all. I see the chat popping off. It is amazing to be here with you on a consequential Monday evening. Welcome to one of the most important conversations we could all be having right now. What do Black men want? Sponsored by the Black Economic Alliance. Listen, over the next hour, we're going to go behind the headlines, past the tweets, past the social posts, and actually get to the heart of the matter. And it is such an honor for me to be with you. My name is Joshua Dubois. I'm the CEO of Values and Gauge.ai. I'm so honored to be partnering with the Black Economic Alliance on this town hall. And we're about to get into some really important stuff. So, listen, what are we talking about here? We are talking about the fact that in roughly 8 days or less for the early voters, Black men around the United States of America will enter a polling booth or fill out a ballot and make a decision that will impact them, us, and all of our lives. The decision of who will be the next president, among other critically important decisions that they will make on those ballots. And I mean that. Listen, y'all, this isn't about politics or social media. It is quite literally about our lives. So I'm coming to you live from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Shout out to Maryland. I see some Maryland folks in the chat. And upstairs from me right now at this very moment, hopefully on their way to bed and not to interrupt our town hall tonight, are two little Black boys, August Dubois, who's 9, and Auden, who is 4, and one beautiful little Black girl, Adelaide Dubois, who, along with my wife, Michelle, runs the entire show. And the decision that we, all of us, the folks on this chat right now, the people on this line and others, will all make in a few days will help determine their future and our future, how much I or they will pay for college in a few years, whether their cousins in Nashville and Coffee County, Tennessee will have access to health care and affordable food, whether their friends' dads will be able to start or grow a business, how the money in their 529 savings account will grow or not grow alongside the growth of the market, and perhaps even whether they have to deal with a tense traffic stop or worse if I ever got pulled over with those babies in the back seat. And that's just my story. Those consequential moments are multiplied across millions of Black men in this country who will be directly impacted by and who will directly impact the 2024 election. And so the amazing folks at the Black Economic Alliance want to unpack all of that. They want to unpack what Black men want so that together we can make informed decisions. Listen, y'all, we're so delighted that the BEA is hosting this. They are the country's leading nonpartisan group of Black business leaders, trusted business leaders focused on expanding work, wages, and wealth in the Black community. We're going to get to one of those leaders in just a moment. But real quick, do me a favor. Everybody on this line, do me a favor. We got thousands of folks who have confirmed this call and are on this line right now. But I want a few more. Do me a favor. Shoot a text to a brother who is not here. Let them know that we're here. Drop them the line, the link to this town hall. Post on social media with the hashtag What Black Men Want. And let's bring folks into this dialogue together. Here to kick us off tonight is a wonderful brother and business leader, Tony Coles, co-chair of the Black Economic Alliance and chairman of Cerevel Therapeutics. Tony, why was it important for the BEA to host this event?
Well, thank you, Joshua. And brothers, allies, and friends, thank you all for joining us tonight. We thought it was important to convene tonight's conversation because our lives, our financial future, our wellness, and our families' well-being are all literally on the line. We're hosting this because Black men can decide this election. Let me say that again. The votes of Black men can decide this election. There are decisive margins of us, of Black men, in every key battleground state that can determine the outcome of this election. And it's literally in our hands. So what we, Black men, choose to do here and in the next week, whether we go out and vote and who we vote for will decide what happens to the country on November 5th. Now, we know Black men generally turn out and support candidates who are for the Black community at the second greatest percentage rate of any race, any gender, and we Black men are second only to Black women in doing so. And we need to do that for this election. In a few days, as we cast our ballots for president and offices up and down the ticket, we have an opportunity to decisively secure the wealth, the safety, and the future of our families, something we all want to do. Not only do we want to secure the economic futures of our families, but we have the opportunity to ensure that the women in our lives, our mothers, daughters, sisters, and others, have the access to the healthcare freedoms they so richly deserve. Because if we don't take care of them, who will? We have a clear choice to make. We can either go back to a time where the government actively held Black men and our women back, or we can go forward and secure our financial futures and the rights of the beautiful Black women we love. But it's not enough to just say that. We have to dig into the real issues, understand the contrast, understand what's at stake, and have a real substantive conversation. That's what we're here to do tonight. So with that, brothers, let's get into it.
What do Black men want? It's a question that's been asked in headlines and debated from the barbershop to the halls of power. From the Obama years, when hope and progress felt within reach.
Because together we have a chance to choose a new generation of leadership in this country and start building a better and stronger and fairer and more hopeful America.
To the divisive rhetoric that followed.
You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs.
Black men have been at the center of every conversation, but too often without a seat at the table. Now, as we look to the future, we're changing that.
The baseline should be everybody has a job. What we should be doing is creating incentives for people to be able to build wealth and build intergenerational wealth.
This virtual town hall is about what Black men truly want. Wellness for themselves and their families, the power and opportunity to build generational wealth, and the voice to shape the 2024 election and beyond. We're not just reacting, we're building. And today, we're taking action to ensure that we make the best, informed decisions in the upcoming general election, so that the opportunity to achieve wellness, wealth, and power becomes a reality for every Black man in America. The future isn't just coming, it's ours to create. It's now.
Wellness, wealth, and power. The future isn't coming, it's ours to create. It's now. I love that message by our hosts, the Black Economic Alliance, who've convened us today. Listen, y'all, we're going to show this a few times throughout the night. If you don't listen to anything else, I know you're going to listen to everything, but pay attention to how to actually vote. Can we pull up the vote slide? Everything you need to vote, you can find at bit.ly/vote 2024 election. You could scan that QR code and go straight there. I'm seeing some people popping off in the chat right now. Robert Duncan said he voted last Monday. Mark Kennedy said he banked that early vote. Robert Hernandez coming in from Miami. I don't know if Robert's voted yet, but I'm excited for you to get to the polls. Brothers from around the Robert Duncan, Chai Love, David Etta, and a lot of sisters who are allies, and I know have brothers in their lives that need to hear this message as well. So excited that everybody is getting their votes in. Listen, we want to go to a very special guest who has been a real key part of bringing this event together tonight. D.L. Hughley is one of the country's most informed, powerful, and persuasive, and frequently hilarious voices as well. But he's on some serious matters right now. He's a best-selling author, actor, advocate, and so much more. And he cares deeply about this election. Brother D.L., thank you for joining What Do Black Men Want?
Hey, man, thank you very, very much. I think that the title says it all. I think that what we want is for America, what is America has seemingly always promised, has certainly always promised. And I think more than a job, we want a chance, an opportunity to go as far as our talents and desires want us to, like everybody else. So I think that that's one thing, but we also want for our women to be safe and our children to be educated. We want like what everybody else wants. And I think we want to be treated as, to me, this word shouldn't be that controversial, but fair is the word that comes to mind. And I think it's so gratifying to see that instead of just underreacting or being silent, we are asking for demands with a level of specificity I've never seen before. And the other thing I've never seen before, I've never heard politicians ask what we want. You got to remember that one side has been at the top of the ticket for 10 years straight. Since 2015 till now, one guy has been at the top of a political party. Another one has been there 120 days. And I think that we can see by the turmoil and by how much conversation they're having, how important we are. So it's gratifying to see men looking at politics as a transactional endeavor as opposed to one of just passion and just, showing up. We have to make demands. They have to be specific, and we have to make sure that we have clear indicators as to whether they're being met or not.
Yeah, that's great, DL. We have to make demands. They have to be specific, and we got to hold people accountable. Now, how do you think the candidates shake out on the issues, brother? What on balance? In fact, there's a sister who asked in the chat, why are people still confused? What are the lies that people are believing?
Well, you know what?
Truth?
People are confused. I think because we don't all have the same levels of interest. Like people are busy. One of the reasons people living their lives and carrying on with their days and haven't been as engaged as some people have. Some people have had a lot of misinformation to deal with, and some people are just cynical. So it's a myriad of things. But ultimately, it's not hard to see. I think the best way forward for our people is and has always been progressivism. I think that we liberals and conservative, those monikers don't really hold much weight. The best way for Black people, in my estimation, is forward, not backward. Seeing what back looks like is forward. If you look at the most conservative state in the country, I'd say Mississippi. Look how Black people live. You look at the most progressive state in the country, Minnesota, and it is a discernible difference. And I think the progressive agenda, the progressive ideas, moving us forward are things that I think are going to be the best things that are suited for our future and our children's future, in my estimation.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, DL. And last question, man. You've spent a fair amount of time with Vice President Kamala Harris yourself, man. What's your impressions of her, man? For folks who haven't had the opportunity to spend that time, tell people about her.
Well, to be fair, and I have to say this every chance I get. I was one of the people who was spreading a lot of misinformation about her. So the first time, and I'd had conversations with her before, but the first time of the many times I got to talk to her was not a very pleasant situation. She done something I've never seen leaders do. She called a bunch of Black men out, 12 to 15 Black men who she knew weren't necessarily had favorable ideas of her. She sat with us in a room and talked and listened. And I remember it being a very, very heated conversation. It was so heated, as a matter of fact, that the Secret Service looked in, to see what was happening. I came from California. I heard the myth of her record, and I often repeated it. And the thing that I greatly lament is that I never did what she asked me to do that day, which was a fair thing to do, which is to look at her record and ascertain as if the things I've been saying were true, and they were not. And so I think I said this at the DNC, and I'll say it now. When your apology has to be allowed as your accusation. I found her to be when have you ever seen a leader ask what you want and within 120 days have and it's important to differentiate. This isn't something she came up with us. These conversations came about as a result of having conversations about economics with brothers all over the country. This is our plan. This is what we said we wanted. And I think when somebody gives you access or potentially give you access to the things you want, you have an obligation to show up. And then if whether they're doing what they ascertain, whether they're doing what they have promised or not. But I have found her to be an earnest leader. That's the one thing I'd say. She was a leader. She, they say the greatest teachers are the greatest listeners. The greatest leaders are the greatest listeners. I'd have to say that if that were the metric, I think she meets that. It was in spades.
Awesome, man. The greatest listener. That is a quality that we absolutely need as president. Brother DL, hang on for a minute. I know you're going to join the segment with Roland Martin in just a moment. Listen, we're going to get into it right now and pass it over to our brother Roland Martin. But first, I want you to know about a very special brother who's going to be joining us throughout the night. Joshua Doss is a political commentator, strategist. He's an influencer on TikTok with millions of likes on that platform. After every segment with Brother Roland, Joshua Doss is going to be they're going to do what's called a Doss back, and he's going to tell you exactly where the candidates stand on the issues that we've been talking about. Joshua Doss, thank you for joining us for this conversation, man. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Happy to hop in and give that Doss back.
Awesome, man. I am so excited now to have my main man, my brother Roland Martin, who is doing amazing, disruptive, powerful things in media, join us to guide the rest of our conversation. Last night, Roland interviewed the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, and he's here with us tonight as CEO of the Black Star Network, host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. He's been doing this work for years, and we're delighted to have him. Roland, over to you, my friend.
Josh, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much to all the folks who are watching. Thank you for being with us as well. Let's get right into it. First of all, issues with the microphone here, but let's get right into it. And one of the issues that is a paramount concern in this election, finances. Finances is a tremendous issue. And money, taxes, especially for business owners, corporate taxes. Let me just go ahead and fix this microphone here so we got no further disruptions. I was doing my show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're still live on the Black Star Network as well. So corporate taxes, personal taxes, entrepreneurship, all of those things are significant issues on the minds of lots of brothers. You've seen Vice President Kamala Harris lay out an economic plan specifically for African Americans and brothers, but you have not seen that from Donald Trump. I think he offered this platinum plan, but he hasn't talked about it, frankly, in several months. So let's talk about money. Tony Sinkfield is a recent college graduate in Georgia, is now working in a retail store. He has student loans. He's also trying to build a career for himself in animation. So, Tony, first of all, where'd you go to college?
Hi, I went to college at Savannah College of Art and Design.
All right, cool. So let's talk about that. When we look at the issues of of personal finances, what is it that you want to hear? What are you concerned about the most from candidates?
Put simply, I think it's important for my wage to be able to support me and ideally those close to me. All my life, I was brought up on the idea that a college education would be the key to success in the world. And I do not get me wrong, I love my education. It's gotten me so many connections as much as it's gotten me the debt that it's put me in. And I don't regret pursuing my degree, but the debt I've accrued in it and then the lack of success with finding work in this kind of incongruous job market has been kind of honestly demoralizing. Plus, all of this is before factoring in life's various expenses. With rent, for example, I'm paying for a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment, and it's incredibly high. Between bills and other necessary payments, I worry about if living within my means will soon become or soon devolve into surviving within my means. For the candidates, I mostly want to hear what they'll do to support the everyday individuals and families like myself and my own family. I want to hear their plans and their steps and what they will do and the steps that they will take in order to support the everyday citizens, be it financially, such as with reduced rent or with reduced housing costs or even loan forgiveness, or be it with increased wages or reduced educational costs, so we can sort of make good on that promise of college leading to the success story that we all hope for it to be. I would like to hear that I still have hope to purchase a home in the future. And even on a more serious note, I just want to be able to be sure that I can care for myself and my family and even care for my future.
Housing is one of the issues. And so how are you viewing that? Because that is being talked about in a lot of places this year.
So in terms of college is something that is a bit, it's tricky. You got to hope that whatever degree you are in or your degree you're going into is something that can make you living in the long run. Going into bigger fields, into anything that can hopefully get you that degree, get you that work influence or work experience that can get you a better payment is something that's really kind of important to many people. And it's tricky because I've been job searching, I've been taking the experience that I've gained, the connections that I've made. I've been trying to do those. All of these are gained through college, and then try to make a career out of it. I want to believe that college especially a college payment or a college or something that you're going to be investing so much into is something that you can then pay off, something that will then pay off in the long run. And I'm hearing lots of conversations from other brothers or other my friends and peers who are struggling to find these footholds. And I just hope that we can make that either make it a better connection or make it something that we can build further in the future, or even something that we can support the individuals, make sure that whatever we're putting in is something that we are able to get back out from it.
All right, Tony, I certainly appreciate that. And so again, housing, that's an issue. And also obviously student loan debt. We know, of course, the Supreme Court made their decision in terms of that the Biden-Harris administration could not wipe out all student loan debt. But they still have been able to wipe out about $170 billion and nearly 5 million people impacted by that. So we certainly appreciate that, Tony. Folks, joining us right now is Charles Phillips. He's co-chair of the Black Economic Alliance, also co-founding managing partner of Recognize, a private equity firm focused on investing in technology services businesses, and also Kevin Matthews, founder of Building Bread, an education company that helps first-time investors enter the stock market with confidence. Kevin and Charles, glad to see both of you here. And so from your perspective, when you look at the economic plans of both of these candidates, how do you assess them? Kevin, you first.
Sure. I think for me, it comes down to who is putting more money in your pocket and who is making things easier for your wallet. When I look at Donald Trump, we know that his tariffs are going to cost Americans more than $4,000 per year. And we look at Project 2025. If you are looking to buy a home, which we were talking about earlier, he has a plan that is going to gut the Federal Housing Administration and could cost Americans an additional $1,200 per year. That is not going to help Americans. What we do know is Kamala Harris has produced a plan that could help give us $25,000 for a down payment and also add $3 million homes to the U.S. housing supply. We know based on housing supply and what we need, that is actually going to bring down the cost of housing. That is something that we need. And for the Black community, that is the biggest transfer for generational wealth. And we know we need home ownership in the Black community.
Charles, here's the reality when we talk about, people talk a lot about entrepreneurship, but the reality is this here. When you look at Black-owned businesses in this country, 95% of all Black-owned businesses do 5%, do $5 million or less in revenue. And you look at the majority of our companies, not even the majority. I mean, we're talking about 90+% have one employee. So when we talk about an economic policy, how will a president, how will an administration help Black entrepreneurs? We're talking about also we're helping folks do startups, but also how do they expand capacity? And so we have to understand the reality of Black-owned businesses in America today.
First of all, Roland, good to see you, my brother, again. And I heard my brother Tony talking earlier. I identified with what he was saying. So I've known Kamala since 2003 when I was living in San Francisco. She's been thinking about these issues for a long time. So this isn't new. She has receipts on this. So I would say on the Black-owned businesses and small businesses, she has a lot of unique programs about taking a third of government contracts, for instance, and dedicating it to small business, giving you $50,000 to do a startup business. Those are all good things, but we don't want to forget the other half of the people who work for large companies. So the plan there is employee stock ownership programs. So when you work for a large company, you don't really make a lot of money in salary. You need equity ownership. So employee stock ownership program, which is another idea she has to change the tax code to encourage companies to share their equity with their employees. Some are doing it already because it's actually smart to do. You get better employees when you do that. But that's another area she can excel in. And then secondly, I would say on the housing issue, this is going back for 30 years. We haven't been building enough housing. We've had more population growth for a lot of different reasons, permitting, costs, you name it. We couldn't build housing. And so she has a plan to build 3 million new housing by encouraging and incenting local people to change those permitting codes and actually giving them money to do that. And so it's a supply issue. I mean, we have a third of the inventory that we had in 2007 in terms of inventory of housing. This is systemic for everybody, not just Black men. And so she has been thinking about this issue. I've been talking with her about this housing issue for 2 or 3 years. So at least she has specific programs on the issues that we care about.
Well, in fact, Kevin, to Charles's point, because of the home foreclosure crisis in 2008, 2009, we actually built 8 million fewer homes between 2010 and 2019 than the previous decade. That was the fewest number of homes we built in the country since the 1940s. And last week I had the CEO of the National Housing Conference on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and he talked about really how strong her housing plan is, not just that $25,000 of assistance in helping people purchase a home, but the goal to build 3 million new units over a 4-year period. A lot of people don't quite understand the reality of housing. And the other issue that you have is you have private equity firms, Wall Street, they very well be owning upwards of 40% of all single family homes by 2030. So the housing market we're looking at today is completely different than what we've seen really in the past 30 to 40 years.
Absolutely. I don't think, again, like you mentioned, enough people don't realize that it comes down to the supply and demand factor. So when you have these private equity firms buying up the supply, then these prices rise. The median home price today is around $430,000 today. If you go back to 1990, we're talking the average home is around $130,000. It is utterly unaffordable for the average college graduate or even the average American to afford a home. The only candidate today who has a plan is Kamala Harris, period. That's it. That is it. And the average American to even afford a home today has to have a salary of about $110,000. That is not the median salary. The only way to do this is to add more homes. Donald Trump is not even looking at that. It is Kamala Harris, and that is absolutely clear. So to do that, we have to add more homes. We have to have a program to help people get into those homes. And to do that, this is how you create generational wealth. This is how you get a foothold. This is how you get college graduates to start being motivated, to start to save, to have that home, and to pass that on from generation to generation.
Charles, I talk with John Hope Bryant of Operation Hope a lot about this. We talk about, again, when you look at an economic plan, I mean, obviously you have high earners, you have middle class folks, but you also have low income working class folks. And one of the things that has greatly helped folks in that low income working class area is the earned income tax credit. And that has played a huge role. And a lot of people have not, fully tapped into that. But again, that's a part of the tax code that benefits low income Americans, including African Americans.
We should tap into that, but the bigger opportunity is to reposition people for better jobs. So Black men are over-indexed in jobs that can be automated by AI and other technologies. And so we're not investing in retraining people. We used to spend about $17 billion a year in the 1970s. Today we spend about $16 billion. In today's $17 in the dollars, if you index for inflation, we should be spending about $60 billion. We would know how to recruit Black men to be athletes. We can recruit them to work in semiconductor factories and other jobs as well. We're not taking advantage of that talent. And it's good for the country. We're running out of workers. The country is aging. We need more workers, and we're not taking advantage of this big talent pool. So I suggest more job training programs connected with the private sector, and send companies to do that as well. All these big programs like the CHIPS Act and the Infrastructure Act, some of that should be in our neighborhoods and tapping into talent that we can participate in this new generation of industries. And right now we're stuck in these low wage jobs on average that don't get to participate in these next generation industries.
Absolutely. And of course, when you look at college stats, a decreasing number of Black men who are going to college compared to Black women, that also contributes to exactly what you're talking about. Kevin and Charles, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Joshua, back to you.
Brother Roland, quick thing. There was a question in the chat that I think we need to get at real quick. I want to pull it out.
Okay.
There was a gentleman named Roland Johnson who said, we don't need handouts. He said we need to lift ourselves up and don't need handouts. Now that's something that may be in the mind of others, because I see likes on his comment. How do you, Roland or Charles or gentlemen, how do you respond to that?
So let me respond to that, and I'm gonna try not to cuss. And the reason I'm saying that is because Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. Do you know how many handouts Elon Musk has received? Oh, I'm sorry. They're called
EV subsidies.
Incentives. They're called subsidies. Do we want to talk about the solar panel subsidies he got in Buffalo, New York, from the state of New York, more than $1 billion from Texas, from Nevada, from California, when it came to his batteries, things along those lines? Folks, I need everybody to understand, and I do this all the time. Oil companies in America actually receive subsidies from the federal government. Oil companies. We can go down the list. We can go down the list. Listen, I covered City Hall. I covered county government. I can tell you about tax increment financing districts where the money stayed within that particular area. We could talk about opportunity zones. So the reality is this notion of do for self, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Guess what? That is nonsensical. Major corporations in the United States go to the federal government, go to state governments, go to county governments, go to city governments, go to school districts to actually receive subsidies. Subsidies, when it comes to poor people, is called welfare. When it comes to major companies, it's called subsidies. Yeah. And so do understand that we need to not fall for that.
It's industrial policy. So basically, we're going to invest in some industry somewhere. The only question is, do we benefit or does somebody else benefit? You're not going to stop the industrial policy from being made so people are investing and deciding what sectors they want to grow and who gets it. We just need to participate.
I think, Kevin, you were jumping in here.
Since I wanted to add one quick thing. So as a former financial advisor, I managed over $140 million. And anytime I saw a client, we would come up with a real nice tax policy or a tax plan to help someone reduce their taxes or find a way to be very creative to maximize their wealth. When it came to them, it was a strategy. It was savvy. It was smart. But when they look like us, all of a sudden, it was a handout. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm gonna say. So anytime that we try to come up with something that helps us and is tailored to us, when it's a Black men's forum, it just suddenly looks like a handout. But when it's everybody else, when it's Donald Trump and he brags about not paying taxes, it's savvy, right? He's the smartest person in the world. When it's Elon Musk, it's very smart. It's a strategy. But when it's us, it's a handout.
Yeah. So Joshua, I want to just add this final point on here because of this here. As Kevin mentioned earlier, and I think Kevin mentioned, Charles, the tariffs. This is a fact. The tariff war when Trump was in the Oval Office cost American farmers. The federal government provided upwards of $25 billion specifically to farmers because they were impacted by the tariffs. There were farmers in Wisconsin, in Illinois, in Indiana, in Midwestern states that were filing for bankruptcy, that were going out of business because of his tariffs battle. That's a perfect example. China does not pay those tariffs. The customers here do. And the federal government, it was $25 billion in subsidies they received, and Black farmers got virtually none of that $25 billion. And when Biden-Harris came in and established a fund for Black and Hispanic farmers because of discrimination, what did Trump's top aide, Stephen Miller, do? They sued, and that money was finally freed up a few months ago. And so, again, people need to understand when you say handouts, it all depends on the person who's saying it as opposed to other folks. And so handouts, subsidies, is also called R&D. It's a whole different perspective. So do understand, even Jeff Bezos, he gets handouts. I'm sorry, they're called government space contracts. And so just understand the language being used.
No one calls the GI Bill a handout. No one calls the GI Bill a handout.
Y'all, Roland Martin for Communications Director in the Harris administration. Charles
Phillips. No. I can't do that.
Charles Phillips for Treasury Secretary, and Kevin Matthews for head of the National.
That's a big.
All right, listen,
I'm good.
Quick, we're gonna pick up the pace from here. We want to go to Joshua Doss for our first Doss back segment of the night. Joshua, what'd you think about what you just heard and what you got to say, man?
All right, let's do it. So I'm here to kind of talk about what are the actual plans from the actual candidates, right? We want to know, this is important for us to know both of these sides as we're making these informed decisions. We talked a lot about costs. You're going to see on screen a bunch of different things, but I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to touch on some of the things that were the most important throughout our conversation. We talked about housing, but 58% of Black people are renters, right? So let's talk a little bit about the candidates' difference when we're talking about renters. Vice President Harris has talked about cutting red tape to make sure that we build houses more quickly, as was discussed a little bit, rental units more quickly, penalizing firms that hoard available rental properties and drive up prices for those local properties, and also outlawing new forms of price fixing by corporate landlords, right, to make sure that that rent stays low. Unfortunately, I do not have a lot about what Donald Trump has said when it comes to rent, because most times when he's asked, he kind of diverts to something about immigration or the like, and doesn't really have any strong plans about renters on his website or in his Agenda 47. But we have seen and heard from other folks at the Harvard Joint Center that immigration has not been something that has changed the cost of rent in America. So that's what we got on both candidates when it comes to rent. Joshua, back to you.
Awesome, man. So appreciate that. Listen, we're going to go straight into our next segment now that Brother Roland is going to facilitate for us. So the first one was on personal finances, and this next one is focused on small business and entrepreneurship. And so you're going to hear from Robbie Mason, Mason's Barbershop, Richard Lou Dennis, the founder and executive chair of the Sundial Group, Jay Bailey from the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs, Ryan Wilson with the best co-working spot in the country, The Gathering Spot, William Tynroad Toms, and the author and founder of REC, and then from Joshua Doss. So Roland, over to you on small business and entrepreneurship.
Certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Again, the point I earlier said, I'll start with Rich here. The point I started earlier is that we have to understand the Black business ecosystem. We saw it during COVID when it came to PPP loans. The reality is a lot of Black businesses, they had checking accounts with banks, but did not have banking relationships. So therefore they were frozen out of the process. And so when Biden Harris came in, they made some changes to sort of add that. The second thing is that a lot of the businesses, when it came to PPP loans, they had the rules were set up to have full-time employees. Many of the Black-owned businesses, Rich, were 1099s. And so in order for us to understand, what to be asking for, we have to first understand the reality of what the Black business ecosystem actually looks like in America.
Roland, you're absolutely correct. And what we really need in this, we need the confidence of fairness, right? We need to know that when we invest our dollars, when we invest our time, we're going to have the same opportunities as other people who invest their dollars and invest their time, so that we have not a certainty of what the outcome will be, but the confidence that the outcome will be fair. So if you think about what you just talked about regarding PPP, first of all, the access to the information, the clear understanding of how you build a business and how you drive and compete in a business environment needs to be there. And we need to be able to take that and grow our businesses on, as I say, this foundation of fairness, right? So if I don't have the same access and the same opportunities, it's very difficult for me to build something that can withstand these shocks that come up in the system. So I think for me that this confidence of fairness is a very, very important place to be.
Ryan, lots of folk talk about access to capital. I look at this differently when I'm always saying access to contracts. And I'm just going to use listen, I started this show 6 years ago. I started the network 3 years ago. I have no debt. I don't owe anybody. We've been profitable. We started in September 4th, 2018. We've been profitable since March 2020. So I've made the point that, no, I don't need access to capital. I need access to contracts. In my business, the federal government spends $1 billion a year in advertising. Black-owned media gets 1% of the $1 billion. Now, under Biden-Harris, we saw a $10 billion mark hit in terms of contracts to Black-owned businesses coming from the federal government. But we need to be having that same thing, not just access to capital, but also access to contracts to be able to build capacity for Black-owned businesses. And that's contracts with the federal government, state government, local government, but also in the private sector as well.
Roland, I think that you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, nothing beats a customer, right? And so we have to keep, no matter how you're thinking about starting and continuing on with your business, we've got to put at the forefront of that conversation that we need to get you to a paying customer. At the same time, access to capital to give you a shot to have an opportunity, though, is still important. And I think that what Vice President Harris has been talking about over the last, now I think we don't remember how short of a time period this has been, but what she's been discussing in terms of making sure that more folks have access to be able to get into the game is huge. The tax exemption, too, moving from $5,000 to $50,000, that's a part of buying more time to get our businesses to a point where they'll have, again, an opportunity. At the end of the day, I think that the way that this conversation needs to develop is moving from start conversations to scale conversations. And I'm optimistic that under her leadership and given the way that we're all coming together on this topic, that we'll get there.
Robbie, I was having a conversation with a business owner. He owns a couple of restaurants in Houston. And of course, under Donald Trump, the corporate tax rate dropped. And he said, look, that put $500,000 in his pocket.
Good.
Vice President Harris has talked about increasing the corporate tax rate. And what I said to him, I said, well, our response should not be, oh, my God, that's a bad idea. I said, what we should be doing as Black business owners is saying, OK, establish a cap, meaning have that increase in corporate taxes applied to businesses doing $100 million or more. I was like, whatever the number is. I said, so let's just not act like we can't do anything. Let's utilize our organizational mobilization to be able to have a conversation in this. Very much when the McDonald's operators were going and meeting with President Obama, they were talking about making some changes to a living wage. We have to understand that we can be using our voices to drive public policy as well as Black business owners, regardless of our size. All right, Robbie, you there? Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be on the platform, and I'm excited about this election. Yesterday, I was excited when I went to vote early, and it was a great turnout. I'm so proud of what the Democrats are doing. We're getting united. It's so motivated. And the most important thing to me about this election is the democracy and the fact that Kamala Harris is believing in the Constitution. She respects the laws of our system compared to her opponent that has no accountability, and he just does what he wants anytime he wants. And Kamala Harris has initiatives for entrepreneurs and economic equity and raising the small Black businesses and barbershops. I'm like I said, I'm motivated. I'm excited. I'm listening to my customers, and out of say 500 men, we might have 3 Trumpers. So there it is. I mean, let's keep it going, and we just got to get this clown show over with.
Jay, I want to go to you because we talk about entrepreneurs. You are president and CEO of the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs. And part of the problem that we're facing is this idea of, well, you don't know, well, you do not have the information to work with. And over the last 3.5 years, we've seen a increase every single year in the creation of Black-owned businesses. We've actually seen the Biden-Harris folks break down contracts in terms of taking these large contracts. It was bundling under Trump. It's interesting. It happens with Republicans. They will bundle contracts, and then under Democrats, they will unbundle those contracts. The only Republican who did that was George W. Bush, when it came to unbundling. That is important because if you're a Black-owned business and you're able to get a prime contract, you now can bid on other prime contract work as opposed to you always remaining a sub. That's a perfect example of how rules and regulations can be changed that will impact small businesses, especially small to growing Black-owned businesses.
So, Roland, you're right, brother. I know that we lose GDP every year because the brilliant ideas that reside on the south side of every city in America never reach the marketplaces they don't believe they belong. And I know that the only difference between that north side of the tracks and the south side of the tracks is access, opportunity, and exposure. Rich has said it. Ryan has said it. We need all three. It's no secret. It's one thing to start a business. It's a whole other thing to grow a business. And even here in Atlanta, 97, the Black Mecca, where we have more Black businesses than anywhere else, 97% of our Black businesses only have one employee. And we know the Black businesses hire Black people. They stabilize Black communities and have been the backbone of our neighborhoods forever. So if you're asking me like what do Black men want or Black businessmen want, it's literally having a fair shot at the access and the opportunity required to grow a company. And to your point, Roland, we have hundreds of years of examples of how those that we elect have the power to do exactly that. So it's incumbent upon us to use our power through the vote to make sure that we hold them accountable and we bring that access, opportunity, exposure to our communities.
William Tyrone Toms, you're the co-founder of Rec Philadelphia. And here's something that people don't understand. Under the Trump administration, they did not collect racial data. Under Biden Harris, they did. So and then under Trump Pence, they denied systemic racism. So part of the problem here is when you don't collect racial data, then you don't know what the disparities are. Under Project 2025, they want to get rid of anything that records and lays out race. That is a detriment because if you don't understand what the disparities are, you then cannot come up with creative ways to get rid of those disparities.
Yeah, Roland, I think you're exactly right. I think not knowing where the disparities are leads to us just perpetuating more of the problem. And I think a lot of the brothers that, came before me, they highlighted a part of the problem is the access to opportunity. It's access to capital. So when I think about the 50,000 creatives that I represent, that I serve, I know that most of them start off because they want to create and they want to make music and art for the creative expression, right? And then the artistic freedom. But after that, they want the financial freedom that can come with it. So when I think about us being these economic engines as Black men, especially in the creative field that are creating intellectual property, what we know is that this is an industry that is growing in a couple of years to be over $480 billion annually, right? But if we're not recognized as those economic engines, if we don't then have the access to low interest loans to be able to scale, we have a really difficult task ahead of us, right? And I know that for Black men in general and Black business owners in general, it's difficult to get these loans, especially if you just have a simple, a mainstream business that's rarely understandable. You're in real estate or you're building a plumbing company. But just imagine the magnification of the difficulty if you come to them and you're in the creative field. These institutions don't understand it, right? So then you just have an uphill battle to be able to get the capital you need to scale. So when you ask me, like, what do creatives need? What do we want as Black men? Is we want access to the same amount of capital or more capital to be able to grow our business like other folks, because we want to build wealth on our own terms. So we need to figure out how we can be able to come to the table and they understand our challenges and folks understand these innovative industries that are growing so we can have a fair shot and have the same access that our counterparts have.
Rich Dennis, final question to you. It's very interesting. I've had some folks who will say, well, she's been vice president. Why haven't we actually seen these things? But we've actually had. The problem is she hasn't been getting covered because of what I do every single day with this show, 2 hours a day. She's been meeting with Black entrepreneurs. She's been meeting and dealing with the issue of access to capital, been dealing with contracts, all these different things have been happening in conjunction with the role of Congressional Black Caucus and what they're doing. I just think what a lot of people don't understand is they don't actually see a lot of the things that are actually happening that are being done. There is a stark difference between the last almost 4 years under this administration than what I saw under Trump Pence, and even to a certain degree under Obama Biden.
Right. Well, Roland, she's been doing a lot more than just meeting, right? And to your point, that's not covered. The meetings to understand what the needs are, where the sentiments are, where people need help. Those things are very important. But let's talk about what's actually been happening. When you think about the student loan forgiveness that you talked about, how that impacts our community, how that then allows us to invest our dollars in our businesses as opposed to paying off student loans. When you talk about the support around the Fearless Fund, and when they got sued for investing money in the Black community with Black women, the level of support and engagement that came from there. Like we have to really take a step back and look at, hey, what has been different, right? And I think with what she's been doing, what the Biden administration have been doing, we've seen a market shift in how Black businesses are being approached, and we need that to continue, right? You're right. When we look at some of these other administrations, nothing deliberate has been done. I think if you look at the rate at which Black businesses have been growing, when you look at the challenges that Black businesses are having today, a lot of those are not the result of government policy, right? A lot of those are the result of just the micro and the macroeconomic environments and the shifts that we're needing to make. Having an administration and having a leader that is focused on how those shifts and how those policies impact the abilities of every citizen in this country to build a business is going to be critical to our own success. And so my point is, it's not just meeting with people, it's actual actions that have been taken already and things that we're already starting to see the benefits from.
And the actions we're talking about also happen with executive action. It's not all based upon who controls the Congress. So, gentlemen, we appreciate all of you.
Let's realize also she has a leader and she's following that leader, right? So now there's the opportunity for her to lead and for her to drive these things herself. And I think you're going to see some incredible outcomes from this.
Absolutely. And so, gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Joshua, back to you.
Absolutely. Time for our DOS back real quick on small business and entrepreneurship. Joshua Doss, anything you want to share about the candidates on this one, man?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on a lot of it right there. There's actual action behind what we've been talking about, starting with the Minority Business Development Agency, an agency that's sole purpose is to assist minority businesses, right? It doesn't cost the American taxpayer much, about 11 cents per person. The Harris-Biden administration permanently secured this and it had a program, a capital readiness program that invested $120 million in nonprofits, in incubators and Black entrepreneurs, which doubled the amount of Black households with the business. That's something that happened under the Harris administration, on top of her offering an expansion, offering forgivable loans up to $20,000. We checked with the Trump team. There is not much that he has, not anything at all that he has in his plan for supporting Black entrepreneurs, but he actually is connected to the Minority Business Development Agency because he attempted to gut it twice throughout his first term. Back to you, Joshua.
Awesome, man. So do you want a gutted MBDA or do you want somebody that's going to invest in small businesses? Roll it up next for a real quick segment, but an important one is what do Black men want when it comes to their mental health with Dr. Jay Barnett, author and mental health expert, the founder of the Just Heal Bro Tour. Over to you, Roland.
Yeah, Jay, I think too many people focus on, when they talk about Black men, it's always money, 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 money. And when I talked to Vice President Kamala Harris, when we were in Greenville, she talked about caring about the whole of the Black man, not just his pocketbooks, but also his physical and mental health as well. And the reality is, when you look at the Affordable Care Act, you look at the expansion of that for African Americans. Now you're talking about the ability to deal with brothers and sisters when it comes to their physical and mental health.
Hey, Roland, how you doing, man? So excited about this opportunity. I think, as I was watching earlier, I think it's critical that we understand, as you're talking about, understanding the disparities and understanding our relationship with the healthcare system. And I think it's important to understand that if you're going to treat Black people, we have to be able to understand the contextualized background, historically when it comes to the healthcare system and as providers. Oftentimes, Black men have been misdiagnosed. Black men have not been treated properly. And you can take this all the way back to the school system for Black boys. Often Black boys are criminalized when they have issues in the classroom. And often I like to say that those issues are clinical. And so I think if you're going to push the needle forward when it comes to Black men showing up in spaces, Black men being able to be the best that they can be in the world, we have to consider them holistically. And we also have to consider how we're providing care for them and being able to fund community initiatives that are trusted messengers. And I think oftentimes we're trying to push Black men and Blacks all together into these whitewashed spaces and into these agencies that has no research on how to treat Black people, because mental health was not for Blacks. And if you study historically, often their methods and even some of their strategies don't have any understanding of how to treat us when it comes to mental health.
And of course, we talk about mental health. That's also financial strain and stress, things along those lines. So when you think about capping the cost of insulin, when you think about capping medical expenses, listen, when you don't have that level of stress, worrying about your grandmother or mothers and fathers, that has an impact on your mental wealth, your physical well-being as well, what's happening with financially. And so we have to look at those particular policies, how candidates are speaking about mental and physical health. And so, Joshua, in our DOS-back segment, what does it show in terms of both candidates on this issue?
Over to the DOS-back, because Joshua Doss has some great information for us here. Thank you, Roland.
Yeah, I'm a pollster. I sit in focus groups with Black men and Black women all the time. You talk to Black women, the number one thing that they want for their Black men is mental health, access to mental health. We see that Black people are 20% of Medicaid recipients, and Trump's attempts to slash some of those what is given to Black men during Medicaid from Medicaid would cause more barriers to getting the mental health that Black men need. On the other side, we see Vice President Harris, if you saw the Black Male Agenda, wants to launch the National Health Equity Initiative that focuses on Black men. And it really leans in on focusing on Black men's access to mental health, among other things.
Yeah. That's awesome, Joshua. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Dr. Jay Barnett. Y'all need to get up on the Just Heal Bro tour and all that Dr. Jay is doing. He's doing amazing work helping brothers heal. Please follow him on Instagram and all other platforms. Roland, the next one is a powerful one. It's an important one. What do Black men want when it comes to political and economic power? With Derek Johnson, my main man and the president and CEO of the NAACP, Reverend Michael Blake, President Obama's former head of African American Outreach, CEO, founder of Atlas Strategy Group, and former Assemblyman Ron Busby Sr., CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers of Commerce Incorporated. And I see Brother D.L. Hughley is still hanging on the line, so not to put him on the spot, but maybe he wants to join this conversation too, Roland. So we'll throw it over to those gentlemen and to you as well.
I was talking to then Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. Of a few years ago when he was in Congress, and there were a group of young people who came to him and they said, man, if you don't do what we tell you to do, we're going to vote you out. He says, I don't give a damn what none of y'all think. He said, you see that building right there? He said, all those folks, he said, and they walkers in they scooters, they vote, you don't. And what he was trying to explain is that the people who show up, that's who politicians listen to. So when we look at Louisiana, a significant number of African Americans, more than 900,000, but barely 2 out of 10 have voted early. When we look at Milwaukee, a perfect example, 50,000 fewer people voted in 2022 than 2020. Had they voted in 2022, Mandela Barnes, Lieutenant Governor, her brother, would be the United States Senator as opposed to MAGA Ron Johnson. And so when we talk about why we must maximize our vote, it's not that Black men are not voting, but it's maximizing our vote, then we can leverage that power. And so, Derek, I'll start with you. Former Ambassador Andrew Young, he talks about it all the time. And I've been saying the same thing to Detroit and other places. If our target is 70% of the eligible African Americans voting, we could sweep elections nationwide, but it can't happen when we're voting at 30, 35, 38, 40% capacity.
Well, that is a big problem. That's also due to lack of investment and the Black political infrastructure. We began to see the erosion of the Black political infrastructure in the early 2000s. For the NAACP, we are working hard to address that. This election cycle alone, we're spending over $20 million. We're putting $6 million into local groups. And some of them are not even NAACP units because we have to rebuild the Black infrastructure. Louisiana's a problem. We've heard it time and time again, but for some reason, there has been no investment in that state. There's been a lack of investment across the country. And so when we leave this election after we're successful, we need to focus on how do we rebuild, replenish, and strengthen that infrastructure.
You know, Michael Blake, you're founder of Atlas Strategy Group. And one of the things that we did with the Win with Black Men call in July, we raised $1.5 million. We kept a third of that, and we specifically said we were going to invest in Black male organizations that were on the ground. And I think that's one of the things that we have to understand, that if we're talking about how do we maximize Black men political power to get economic power, that means that we also are investing in our own organizations and not waiting for somebody else to cut a check. Your thoughts?
It's necessary. You know, when we think about what is not happening too often, it is an insufficient support around the infrastructure, as Derek was just talking through. And so, you know, we always highlight the responsibility of the long-term game. When you are not putting in the resources when it comes to training, then it makes it harder to find the right staffers. You're struggling to find the right staffers, you're struggling to find the right campaign managers, struggling to do that, then it makes it harder for the candidates themselves. And so what we are doing throughout our whole effort around the Kairos Democracy Project is making sure that we're thinking through the short and the long game. The efforts around this is critical. You know, I always go back to a stat that resonates with me. 206 counties voted for Barack Obama twice and then voted for Donald Trump. And so that happens because we didn't sustain the infrastructure from election to election. And so what we did earlier this year through our collective efforts with the collective, with Win with Black Men, with Kairos Democracy Project, with you, Roland, with Bakari Sellers and others, it said very clearly, we're not going to hope that Black men organizations get supported. We're going to make it happen, because too often we're waiting for support and resources. We're seeing that happen across the country right now. Too often funding is only going towards paid media. It's not going towards crisis communication and canvassing and calls and voter protection. And what we are doing right now is necessary to make that all happen from there.
You know, Ron Busby, when we talk about, again, how this is all about maximizing political power. The reality is, on the Democratic side, Black women are the #1 group that votes for Democrats. Black men are #2. And when we make decisions to sit elections out, whether we're talking school board election, mayoral election, city council, state rep, county commissioners, DA, judicial races, governor races, and congressional, what that means is it is the equivalent of literally having a television, a nice big screen television in your living room, but it ain't plugged up. You can't watch it unless you have power. You have to actually plug into that power, and voting power is the start of that. Now, after the election, it's a different process, but we've got to make sure we're maximizing our vote.
You know, Roland, I'm from Oakland, California, and I remember when I first moved here, I read the license plate, and it really shocked me of Washington, D.C. It literally reads taxation without representation. So equally as important as voting for a president, we've got to have down ballot candidates as well as people that are at the table that are representing our best interests. So often here in Washington, D.C., when policies are being created, they're created under the auspices of minority programs. Roland, we're not minorities. We are Black business owners, Black fathers, Black men. And when you look at the pie, the $640 billion that America spends every year, only 1.5% of that goes towards Black firms. 94 cents of every dollar that this country spends goes to either white men or white women. But when you have people at the table that are allowing policies to be able to be created that don't represent Black men as well as Black communities, we are always going to be having these types of conversations of saying, well, it never matters if I vote or not, or I can sit this one out. I have this 78-inch TV. I'm fine, even if I can't turn it on. What we've got to do is make sure that we elect her, that we make sure that we have policies that are going to be intentional, that are going to be transparent, and that we have accountability. And that's what the U.S. Black Chamber, as well as many of the organizations that are on tonight, are here to discuss. How do we make sure that Black policies are being created, implemented, and making sure if we can go from 1.5% spend to 3% spend, that's an additional $10 billion of opportunity for Black-owned businesses. That's what the U.S. Black Chambers is making sure that is going to happen during the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Hey, DL, I had a brother who was on my Instagram, and he said, I'm not voting. It was two things. He says, I'm not voting until we change electoral college. And I said, bruh, let me help you out. I said, the electoral college is a constitutional amendment, which means that Congress has to pass it. The president has to sign it. Then it must be ratified by state legislatures. I said, so if you don't vote, then you can't impact who votes to change electoral college. I said, so it ain't just gonna happen because you sit on the couch. Again, that it's getting folk to understand how to maximize your power to achieve political change that then impacts economic, health, and so many other areas.
It's everything. But I will say this. It's a couple of things I got to get back to. One, when the brother said we don't want a handout, well, then ask a football owner who builds those stadiums his teams play.
Boom.
Ask him how that happens.
Boom.
And the other thing is when the young brother was talking about a jobs program and what the one thing I'll say, Trump does have a jobs program. He plans to eradicate the Department of Education, so we're not educated. He plans to kick out large numbers of immigrants and then give us those what he called black jobs. That is literally his plan. That's so. And the other thing, when we're talking about the consolidation of political power, the three starkest examples I can give you. One of the reasons that Kamala Harris is the nominee, and if we didn't have a fractious, event going on to see who the nominee would be, because they knew that black women were so powerful, they didn't risk angering them. That's a clear. She is the nominee right now because they wouldn't dare do something that messed with the golden goose. They wouldn't do it. The other thing is they have a Supreme Court justice because they demanded one. A black Supreme Court justice. Black men do not have anybody that sits in the Supreme Court that is reflective of our ideas and values. Maybe our skin color, but not our ideas, experiences, and values. And the other thing is Brittany Griner got out of jail before a spy and a Marine. She got out of jail because black women said she should. Those are examples of power. Just it's the consistency that they've shown. It is the specific acts that they've had, and their idea to navigate and wield political power in a way that benefits them. Like there's a reason that they got a lot of black judges. There's a reason that a lot of they were their power. They made sure that everybody understood what it was, and they weren't afraid to use it.
You know, I had to remind some folk, Derek, that I had a group of brothers and they were saying, man, a folk not listening to us, this, that, and the other. I said, well, let me tell you what happened in 2016. 2016, after the election, a group of sisters got together and wrote a letter to the head of the DNC, says, y'all ain't paying attention. Got a meeting, made some changes. And again, that doesn't happen if we don't organize and mobilize. And so what has to happen if folk want change, if they want change, it literally means mobilizing and organizing and not just sort of thinking that a singular individual can do it. That also means having an agenda that is consistent, that's not a one-time thing. And so what I keep telling people is that the election is the end of one process. Yes, you must vote. When the election is over, then you must be pushing and pressing folk on the local, state, and national level to do what they said they were going to do. And even if your candidate lost, you are still a constituent.
But the problem that we have seen, people run to the front of the room to get the microphone, and no one is focusing on how do we get the work done, develop the agenda, and implement a plan over time. We wouldn't be here but for a group of individuals who challenged a system and went to New Jersey in 1964 and forced the conversation to come back in 1968 to develop the opportunity, which opened the door for the 70s Black elected officials across cities across America to get elected, leading to Harold Washington, which opened the door for Jesse Jackson in 84 to perfect the system in 88 by Representative delegates, which led to Obama, which opened the door to where we are today. That's a systematic plan that had been implemented over decades by individuals who didn't run to get the microphone, but did the work. And some of those sisters you're talking about in 2016 was trained by Jesse Jackson in 84 and 88 that realized that the rules is the most important part of this process, that political parties are vehicles for agendas. And if you control the rules and understand the agendas, you get the outcome that you work for.
But Mike, I do want to do this here. Derek brought up 1964. Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, Fan Lou Hamer, Bob Moses, they were ticked off that they did not get all that they desired in 64. Dr. King said, listen, he said, we will do this, but in 68, the groups will be fully integrated. I think what happens sometimes, Mike, is that some folk believe, and I've seen this happen over the years, that if I don't get everything I demand now, then I'm checking out of the process. When you could get some of what you want today, but you can come back and get more of that. But I would rather have something today than say, if I can't get all of it, then I'm leaving. That's also a part of us understanding how we must be able to achieve this political power.
Well, let's take it a step further. You can rock with her and get probably about 90% of what you want, or go with him and get nothing. He's a man who said that he doesn't trust Black people with his money. He's a man who has discriminated us, called us clowns, disrespected us in every possible way. And so let's talk about what it is that you want. Do you want to have a better chance for more jobs? Okay, well, she's saying let's provide more funding so we can actually start your businesses. And again, he's saying he doesn't trust you with your money. Let's talk about schools. She's saying let's make it a point that you can actually have HBCU funding. And he is literally saying he will defund public schools that talk about Black history. And when you think about who they surround themselves with, his vice president pick is a man who is the lead sponsor to eliminate DEI. How on earth do you believe you're going to get more from him than her? And so the responsibility we have right now is to make it real clear. You're never going to get 100% from any elected official. I was an elected official for 6 years here in New York. It's impossible. The only person I know that's perfect is Jesus. And so since Jesus is not on the ballot, we got to figure out who's closest there. And so I would rather focus on the candidate who is actually laid out arguably the best economic plan for Black folk, and in particular Black men, maybe than any presidential candidate ever. Absolutely. Versus a man who literally is telling you he does not trust you. And so we got to be clear about that. And then lastly, to the point, Roland, in terms of the comparison of what you want to get versus what you can't get, Project 2025 laid it out. They're being real clear with you on that. Your Medicaid expansion, not going to happen. Your taxes are going to go up. You're going to have less support. So where do you believe you're going to get criminal justice or more funding for your schools or better opportunities for your businesses? You're not getting any of those things. And in the same standpoint, if you even considering supporting this man because of a tax cut, you're not getting a tax cut. You're not the millionaire he's talking about. You want to talk to me about a STEMI check? Well, the Democrats gave you 2. He gave you none, because it was Democrats in Congress who actually made that happen. And so if we want to talk about who actually can help you with the policies that you want, go with the woman who actually has your back versus the one who says he doesn't trust you.
I heard you back there signifying and co-signing, DL.
You know, it's very funny. One thing Trump has been brilliant at is the same thing he's done for disaffected rural white voters. He's given them somebody to blame and somebody to look down on.
Yeah.
Everything for him is drill, baby, drill, and get rid of mass deport immigrants. He has given them someone to blame and someone to look down on. You don't have to look any further than what that Nazi rally they had on Sunday. Not one thing was said about anybody. If you're not them, you're us. And that's the thing. And whether you're a Haitian immigrant or whether you are a Venezuelan immigrant or just a poor black person, or we're shut out outside the conversation. I think it's ridiculous that Kamala Harris has been top of the ticket for 120 days. And I think this is, by the way, the side note is, I think this is one of the most constructive things I've ever seen. I think it's bright. I think that it's forward thinking for men from all kinds of spectrums to get together and have conversations like this, because look at what it's yielded. Just showing up and the opportunity, not withholding our vote, but asking for, it's a transactional endeavor. We're saying this is what we'd like, and we'll support you, and you have to do something. That's transactional. We have to stop deifying political figures, because we don't have to worship them. They're tools, just like a hammer or a car gets you where you want to go. But ultimately, we have to decide, because one way or another, you're going to make a decision. Even if you don't show up, you've made a decision. Whether you vote or not, a decision is made. And so people have to understand, they have told you precisely what they're going to do. They're going to jail everybody. They're going to disband every bit of the social safety net, overtime, environmental safety. One of the things that we haven't talked about, a large swath of black people live in the southern region of the United States of America, where they're reticent to even broach the subject of raising the minimum wage. We can talk about businesses and their incentive, but the best way to keep a business going is to have customers who have access to money themselves. So these are all kinds of conversations we can have. And I think there are some people who just want to be negative and say things like we don't need a handout. And there's some people who are having constructive conversations. And I think this is an example of that. I think black men speaking in one voice, having specific asks and demanding that we get something for our vote is the most constructive thing I've ever seen from our demographic since I can remember. So I'm very proud.
Final question for Ron. And Ron, I want you to just explain to people in short, I want a comparison. How did Trump Pence receive the U.S. Black Chamber compared to Biden Harris?
So many of us, Derek included, the first month, Mike, I know you were there. Trump called a meeting, called all the black organizations in to the White House, and literally told us, you had 8 years, thanks, it's over. And we were all sitting there like kind of confused, like, well, what does he mean? And he said, it's a woman agenda now. And we all said, well, great. We got black sisters, we got wives, we got nieces, we got mothers. We will put our businesses in their names and we'll still have some flexibility of making it happen. And he said, no, white women. And that is where you have seen the white women business contracts go from
he said
54% to 78% of the federal government spend. The quickest way to be able to create wealth is through business ownership. This president, Vice President Harris, is laying out. She said, I want to create 1 million new businesses. If you're a black person, I'm going to give you $50,000 of tax deductions. I'm going to give you another $25,000 of forgivable loans. And oh yeah, by the way, if you're successful and you want to purchase a home, I'm going to give you another $25,000. Roland, I was a business owner for a long time. I had a janitorial service. If somebody had told me they were going to give me $50,000, that would have bought a lot of mop buckets and brooms and vacuum cleaners. This is a platform that young black men can really now say, I have something to start with. When Trump came into office, he told us the doors were closed to us. We had 2 federal grants. Within 90 days, they were both taken from us. And that was from the U.S. Black Chamber. We have got to make sure that we have institutions that are here that are fighting on behalf of our business owners, our communities, as well as our families. And that's what's important. and is going to continue to be important as long as we got an elected official. I'm going to end with this. We're going to hear a lot about making America great again. And I say, as Black people, we want America to be great too. But in order to have a great America, you got to have a great Black America. And in order to have a great Black America, you got to have great Black businesses. And in order to have great Black businesses, you need good leadership. You need people that understand that the people that are elected are there to create policies that move this country forward. Not just some of the country, not just the white folk in the country, but all of the country. And I am positive that Kamala Harris will be that president for us.
Damn, he said that, Derek? Wow.
You know, I want to make one final point. In a two-party system, there are no third candidates that are viable. So for those brothers who say, I'm not going to vote, then you're hurting yourself. For those brothers who say, well, we're going to vote for this third-party candidate, there is no such thing as a viable third-party candidate in this election. So let's stay focused and let's not get distracted by anyone who shows up, whether male, female, Black, or white, to say, vote for me, I'm the third-party option. Because right now, we'll be playing with the people if we did something like that.
Yeah.
All right, DL, Derek, Mike, Blake, Ron, I certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Joshua, take it away.
I appreciate you, man. Listen, we're rounding the corner to our close. Y'all give me till about 9:36 and a half for those who can make it. If you can't, we completely understand, but we're going we have some powerhouse final segments here. Listen, we have a closing segment coming close to our close on building wealth in the long run, and we checked in with the absolute best brothers to speak to wealth building and retirement, which I know is something that is on so many brothers' mind. Ken Frazier, the former chairman and CEO of Merck, and Ken Chenault, who Ebony has called one of the living pioneers in the Black community, the chairperson of General Catalyst Partners and former chairman and CEO of American Express. I spoke with Ken and Ken recently about this topic. We're not going to listen to the whole conversation. We're going to play a quick segment from them now. Let's watch. Ken Frazier, Ken Chenault, it is an honor to be with you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your leadership in so many spaces, including the Black Economic Alliance. And thank you for being here to help answer this big question. What do Black men want? Fellas, let's dive in. So, this segment is about how Black men can set ourselves and our families up for success in the long run. You gentlemen both have achieved a lot in your careers, but I know you had to start somewhere. What are the barriers facing Black men on the road to success, retirement, building wealth, living balanced lives? And what do Black men need to achieve success?
It's terrific to be here with you. And I think what Black men want is an opportunity to realize the American dream.
Yeah.
And the reality is that racism is still alive, is still impacting all of us. But what we need is an opportunity. And if we think about business, we need access to capital.
I would say access to the right kind of educational and job skill development opportunities would be second, especially for men who don't have 4-year degrees. We need to create pathways to the middle class, to jobs and careers that pay a family-sustaining wage. And in that same regard, we need to think about expunging the records for returning citizens who've been incarcerated, which is a huge barrier to employment. Next, I would say is access to health and healthcare, because people who are not in good health obviously find it difficult to be successful in life. And then lastly, I would say for those young people who are still of parenting age, it's access to childcare. So those would be the things that I think are most critically important for young African-American men and African-American men in general in terms of wealth creation.
Ken and Ken, I have another question for you. How do you think the candidates stack up when it comes to enabling long-term success for Black men? What is your assessment of these two presidential candidates and their records?
Look, Joshua, I don't think it's even close. I think there is a tremendous gap between Trump and Vice President Harris. Let me just make a few points. I've been in business for over 40 years. I know Donald Trump, and I can tell you that he is not someone who understands and, in fact, is committed to Black entrepreneurship, to opening up real opportunity for Black people. You know, some people have said to me, well, he's really a good businessman. He could do better for the economy. I have to tell you that there are literally hundreds of economists who think a Trump presidency could lead this country into a recession. That's
Yeah. Wow. That's exactly right. There are lots of folks who believe and in fact know that a Trump presidency would potentially spell economic disaster for so many people. If we can just pull up the full shot, I just want to see who is on the screen now. I believe Brother Roland may have frozen a bit, so I'm going to take. Oh, there you are, Roland. Roland,
I refreshed.
Yeah, we have Wamimo Abbey from Isusu and Brandon Rule. We're going to talk briefly about building wealth, building generational wealth, and what Black men want. And so we can go to Wamimo and Brandon, if that makes sense to you, Roland.
Yeah, it does. Wamimo, so let's go right to that. Listen, you can't build wealth until you have moved out of this what I call survival mode. It has to be not surviving but thriving. And so that really is a combination of education. It's a combination of how do you build that wealth, whether you do it through home ownership, you do it through owning a business, you do it through what Charles was talking about in terms of the kind of sectors you go into. And so public policy plays a significant part in impacting that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Roland. And it's so good to see you and have the opportunity to address these issues. You know, if I just take a step back a little bit, I'm always the person that says math has no opinion. In this country, we have over 45 million people that don't have a credit score, or they have what we call a thin file. The average debt in America is around $92,000. If you do that math, we're leaving close to $4 trillion on the table. And predominantly, the number of people that have been left behind in this equation are predominantly, people of color, especially Black folks that have been left behind. So when we think about the paradigm we're living in, especially as we think about building generational wealth, and home ownership is a big aspect of that, Black folks, especially Black households, have been left behind because there have been systemic barriers that have left us out of the equation for a very, very long time. So one thing that got me really excited is, when I was looking at the plan, saying, the down payment assistance to unlock more housing, the 3 million units in affordable housing that will be deployed, because this is a supply issue. And as a society, we got to stop solving homelessness backwards. So this is some of the things that got me excited. If we want to build wealth, right, we got to find a way to move from the W2 to try as much as possible to move to the K1 or continue to build equity. You, Roland, you did that. You used to work at CNN. Now you got Roland Martin Unfiltered. I don't want us to continue to have the conversation about what Black men want when we have a close election. I want us to continue to have this conversation by listening to folks like you on your platform day in, day out, supporting, organizing perpetually on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. So we have a huge momentum when it comes to time like this to activate our base. That's something that has been left behind. And particularly from a Black man perspective, we need that space, and you're creating that space, and we need more of that.
So what you're laying out, I really think it's important that when we talk about this idea of how do we build wealth, that really speaks to also, to be real honest and frank, access to information. One of the things that I hear from so many people, Brandon, is, oh, I didn't know. And what I keep saying is that we can't be buried where, and I get folk who watch housewife shows and they look at Shade Room and they look at different entertainment sites, but we have to be seeking information that is bettering ourselves. That plays a role in this as well. So when we talk about increasing credit scores, going to the places, going to Operation Hope and others that does that, getting right information in order to be able to build and create and grow generational wealth.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, right? So education is the first piece. I think access to that, is the starting point for being able to go get access to capital, right? So when we think about, just us as Black men and we're trying to create wealth, how are we typically viewed? I think the information is there. We are kings. We have godlike ability, and we have Black women aside us and have shown to be the most resilient group. But the information that also is out there is kind of external information that is always in us too. So we hear that we're 10 times less than white people because of the racial wealth gap. We hear all the information that are facts from slavery and redlining and the GI Bill, et cetera. And that has contributed to our wealth or lack thereof. But I think as we move forward, we need to realize that what they say about us is not necessarily who we are, right? No matter where you are in the world, if you put any group of people, regardless of race, into a concentration of poverty, you'll get the same result. Unfortunately for us, the information that's spewed is that we're thugs and we're constantly incarcerated. And the only wealth generating opportunity that we have market permission for is to, run, jump, or entertain. So I think, as we go forward, really, it's important for us to understand what we want to do. What we're looking to accomplish is to create, thriving mixed income communities that have healthy access to public school systems and equitable access to healthcare. We want resources so our children can grow up and achieve the goals that they're trying to accomplish. And when that's accomplished, we want the ability to go choose and live in those areas, right? As much as affordable housing is a button point, we really have a issue of housing affordability more than affordable housing. Frankly, when we think about information that should be communicated is we need affordability at all levels, not just the lowest income. We are not synonymous with low income. We have many doctors, lawyers, teachers, and people that are civic servants of this community that also need an ability for affordability. And luckily, I think the Biden-Harris administration has done some things to move that forward. They've increased the budget of the Choice Neighborhood Implementation Grant, which my firm, Rural Enterprises, partnered with the Integral Group, was fortunate to win two $50 million checks to be able to do and create those communities in Birmingham and Houston. So right there, we have two Black leading firms developing in two Black cities and two Black neighborhoods that I truly believe is a good piece to move us forward. And then I'll just put a button on it by saying Vice President Harris's new proposals to creation of 3 million new affordable housing units is really important. As mentioned, $25,000 per home for down payment assistance, and really the expansion of the low-income housing tax credit, which is the #1 tool to create housing affordability in this country, is very, very important. So that's aligned with what we want. But the last thing I'll state, what we need is to build Black wealth, not just Black wages. What we need is similar to what we're doing in Birmingham and Houston to not be the anomaly, it should be the norm. And the last thing I'll just say to that is we don't need another program. We don't need a set aside. We don't need any of that. We need the procurement process to be tailored as such so that Black men and Black women can participate as the leads of these initiatives is going forward. And that's the information that should be spewed. So thank you for the time, and I appreciate it.
Oh, well, Moso, I do want to ask you this here because I got to go back to 2014. I'll never forget Wall Street Journal, 6 columns across the front, March of 2014, $23.09 billion was handed out in small business loans. Black businesses got 385 million of those dollars. When they were breaking down what happened, part of the huge part is that most African Americans, the only collateral they had was their home. Due to the home foreclosure crisis in 2009, 2010, 2011, folks were losing their home. We lost 53% of all Black wealth as a result. So it was very simple. No home, no loan, no business. And so we have to understand all of these things are interrelated. So credit score, home ownership, determines what your interest rates are, and also in terms of you being able to build equity. How can you then use the collateral? You start your own business, education. And so we can't act as if there's this one singular thing that's going to lead to Black wealth creation. No, it is a variety of things that move and work together in unison.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on there. I can just give you some numbers. I run a company that when people pay rent, it shows up on their credit score. And there are over 110 million people in this country that rent. They send close to $1.4 trillion to their landlords every year. And your mortgage is one of the most reliable ways to essentially show that you can meet a big obligation and continue to build wealth in the American society. But what we do see is like there's systemic barriers that have left people out of the equation, right? And when we started reporting rental data, one thing that we did find is we've now unlocked for folks, tens of thousands of families, over $23 billion in access to new mortgages. These are people that have otherwise been left behind. My own personal story also, when we moved to Minnesota, my mother and I walked into one of the biggest banks to borrow money. We were turned away and had to go borrow money from a payday loan lender at over 400% interest rate. And my mother had to sell my father's wedding ring and borrowed money from the church. And that's how we got started in this country. Under the previous administration, we had 326 investors said no to us because they're like, the business that you're building, we don't know if it's going to amount to anything or it's going to actually impact the communities you said it's going to impact. Under the Biden-Harris administration, our company became $1 billion company. So that's the true power of, building wealth and being as thoughtful as possible. And one thing that also resonates with me is this idea that genius is everywhere, but opportunity is not. Vice President Harris' sort of opportunity economy, I believe fundamentally from what I have read, will uplift Black men and strengthen our communities and move us forward. The road to White House really needs us desperately, and we must come out and show up and support because we got to stand with the sister. Like the African proverb, if we want to go fast, we can go alone, but if we want to go far, we need to go together and support her to reach the White House and actually fight for the things we fundamentally care about.
All right, gentlemen, I certainly appreciate y'all being with us. Thank you so very much. Joshua, back to you.
We know that you have been generous with your time, my brother, and so whenever you need to head, we are coming to our close now. We have our hot button segment, and then our close. Me and Brother Wisdom Cole are going to take us out of here. But we want to hit on some of the key issues that are on Black men's mind that we haven't touched on yet. We have Dr. Brandon Frame, founder of the Black Man Can, David Youngblood, Esquire, the general counsel for the Madison Group, and Joshua Doss, who are going to touch on immigration, criminal justice, and healthcare, just in kind of rapid fire mode. We want to go over to them now. And so, brother Youngblood, you want to speak to this issue of immigration? We've heard a lot about this in this election. What do people believe that is not true, and what do they need to know about immigration?
Here's first, let me thank everyone for being on the show tonight. And I'd like to say this about immigrants, quote, taking jobs from Americans, unquote. There's generally a misconception about immigrants taking jobs from Americans and their impact on the U.S. economy. Here's some key points that help debunk this myth. Immigrants often work in sectors where there are labor shortages or in roles that actually complement the work done by American-born workers, rather than directly competing for those same jobs. For instance, many immigrants work in the agriculture, construction, or service industries that often face hiring challenges due to the low number of US-born workers interested in those roles. Number two, immigrants contribute to economic growth, which creates additional jobs that employ American-born workers who are African-American men. Number three, Immigrants contribute to economic growth, which contributes to more overall jobs and creates additional demand for services and goods. As you can ask Ron Busby or Derek Johnson or Roland Martin, when you have immigrants contributing to the overall GDP of the country, you're actually increasing the number of jobs available to African American men. The last point I'd like to make, I know we're pressed for time, but I'd like to make the point that in relation to what happened yesterday in New York, here's the overall point. The mistake we should not make is to allow someone to hate another person who hasn't wronged you. Only a fool inherits other people's enemies as a sign of loyalty. And what we found, what we saw on display yesterday was that. I really would like to leave the audience with that point. Stop adopting other people's enemies.
Wow. Wow, David. Stop adopting other people's enemies. Who told you you had to hate them folks? Come on. You know, why did we buy into that lie? Dr. Brandon Frame, one of the most dynamic brothers I know, the founder of the Black Man Can. If y'all aren't following, you got to get behind the Black Man Can. When it comes to healthcare, man, what's your sense of what brothers need to know? Lots of conversations about Obamacare, about reproductive rights. Where do you think Black men are on this issue of healthcare in the election?
Thank you so much for having me. And I got a few thoughts here as a professor of social emotional learning and the founder of the Black Man Can. First, when we talk about women's reproductive health, we're not just talking about women's issues. We're talking about the heart of our families, our futures, and our communities. Every pregnancy, every birth, and every woman's health journey impacts us all profoundly. We must recognize that supporting women's reproductive health is not only a moral duty, it's an essential commitment to the very fabric of who we are as men, as partners, as fathers, and as allies. Just imagine a Black woman navigating the healthcare system where her needs are too often overlooked. Her life, her safety, rely on someone advocating for her, someone making sure her voice is heard. And as Black men, we need to be the advocates. Being my sister's supporter means that we're not just bystanders, we are protectors, standing right beside her to ensure that the resources, the respect, and the care that she deserves. Being my sister's supporter means showing up unapologetically, unwaveringly. It means that the advocacy for her health is not limited to words. It's reflected in our actions, our votes, and our willingness to change the system that too often neglects her needs. Her health, her rights, her safety, these are sacred. And by standing with her, we are doing our part to create a future where Black mothers, sisters, daughters have the freedom to choose, to thrive, and to live without fear. This is our duty and our responsibility and our honor. When I think about going into our own healthcare and think about ourselves, I think about the Black Male Opportunity Agenda, which is more of a call to advance our communities. It's about prioritizing our own health and well-being, the foundation for a stronger future. For us to fully realize the vision of economic mobility, educational access, and social justice, we must first start with taking care of ourselves, our body and our mind. How do we advocate for better healthcare, fairer policies, and stronger communities if we ourselves are struggling with preventable health issues? The Opportunity Agenda isn't just about external resources. It's a commitment to ensuring that we are physically, mentally, and emotionally prepared to meet the challenges and opportunities before us. And if you give me I got one more minute, because I think one issue that I really just wanted to tap on as a professor, I have to touch on it, is just talk about education. And our investment in education isn't just a matter of policy, it's a matter of legacy. Education is the foundation on which dreams are built, where young Black boys and girls discover their potential and begin to shape their future. But there are those who seek to strip the foundation away. We've heard promises to dismantle the Department of Education, to ban books, to erase our history from classrooms. They want to silence the stories of our heroes, to make invisible the contributions and resilience of Black men and women who have come before us. They want to deny our young people the right to know who they are and where they come from and what they're capable of. But we can't let that happen, not on our watch. This year, Just this year, 2024, we celebrated the 80th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education, and it's the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer, movements where Black men and women, boys and girls fought courageously for the right to learn, to grow, to be free. We cannot let those sacrifices be in vain. We have a duty to protect the gains, to ensure that every child, regardless of where they come from, have the access to high quality education, the truth, and are full of opportunity.
Brandon Frame, man, you better preach. Bishop Dr. Brandon Frame over here, man. I love that. Oh, that was awesome. And just powerful. Thank you for bringing us that history forward into the present day. And I need to hold one of them Black Man Can hoodies as soon as you have a chance. Joshua Doss, over to you to close this out, because people have been talking crazy about criminal justice reform and Kamala Harris's record, man. Set the record straight on this, because we've heard a lot of nonsense on this one, man. What's the deal with criminal justice and Vice President Kamala Harris?
Yeah, well, I'll take a step back and say I'm glad we're having this conversation, particularly about criminal justice reform, something that our community is frequently running into issues with in our own country, in the country that we built. There was a ton of misinformation about Kamala Harris's record, and it mattered when folks thought that she locked up a ton of Black men for weed. It mattered because we have this relationship with the criminal justice reform with the criminal justice system that is sensitive, right? An ugly history, and it mattered. And so I believe that if it mattered when we thought that that's what she did, it has to matter that she has a plan now that supports legalizing marijuana, ensuring that Black men who have been disproportionately criminalized for marijuana offenses have opportunities to succeed in that business, and talking about expunging records. If that mattered, then this must also matter, right? And I think that's incredibly important for us to be talking about. We have a community that has just been disproportionately affected by this criminal justice system, and we have a party that is trying to give police officers qualified immunity to walk around in our communities where our cousins, our aunties, and our uncles live with trigger fingers and knowing that they're not going to get any consequences, right? We have one side that is saying that. If that matters, it also has to matter that we have another side that is talking about reimagining our relationship with policing in America, right? Banning chokeholds, banning no-knock warrants, banning the very thing, implementing racial bias training among police officers, implementing the very things that keep our community safe, right? And keep us away from that early introduction to the criminal justice system that we know then eventually will create a repeat offending situation. So I think that that's where we are with criminal justice, or with criminal justice reform and the two candidates. And that's just my opinion on how we should move forward.
Awesome, Joshua. Thank you. And thank you for your DOSBAC contributions throughout this conversation. Gentlemen, you have been amazing on the toughest issues imaginable. And we so appreciate your perspective. And I know the people in the chat do as well. And I love this comment just real quick. Greg Wheat said, look at all these brothers smiling. It's the small things that matter, right? So Black men continue to smile. Thank you all. Y'all, we're closing this out. Thank you for we are going long because this is an important election and we got a lot to say, but we have now come to our close. We got an awesome young man on the line to help us close. He's going to talk a little bit about the intergenerational parts of this election. Wisdom Cole is the Senior National Director of Advocacy for the NAACP, but he's doing a lot of organizing among young people. Why should young people care about this election, Wisdom? Why is this something that should cut across generations and mobilize all people?
And Joshua, it's great to be here with you. And I just want to echo all the sentiments that our brothers have said tonight. You know, we've been talking about a lot of the key issues that matter the most in this election. And I think for young people, you know, this is really an intergenerational battle, right? There are so many key issues that haven't been fought for that are on the ballot today, right? For all those who've received student debt cancellation, student debt is still on the ballot. For all those who are concerned about environmental climate justice, that is on the ballot as well. The future of health equity, right? You know, these are all key issues that young people are invested in because we are issue-based voters, right? It's important for us to recognize the intergenerational connection that is happening in this moment in time, right? You know, the baton is being passed for us to turn up and to turn out. You know, we have seen our elders talk about the fight for civil rights and talk about the fight for economic justice and political representation. And that fight is far from over, right? We are not starting from scratch. we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we are continuing that race. And so it's important for us to continue to have these conversations with our families, with our friends, recognizing that voting is a family affair. It's important for us to mobilize those who are in our networks, for us to use the areas that we are engaged in already, right? You know, I'm seeing young people register and turn out people at the club. I'm seeing young people engage with folks on their HBCU campuses. I'm seeing folks do 1,000,001 tours all across this nation, making sure that we are turning out young people, because the future of this election, the future of the results that happen from this election will impact us for generations to come. Generations that haven't even been born yet will feel the impact of this election.
Amen, brother. Wisdom indeed. Thank you so much, my man. And thank you for all the work that you're doing every single day. Y'all, we have come to our close. I hope you have been blessed by this conversation. Black Economic Alliance, thank you for hosting. We got a lot of comments where people asking where to find this conversation. You're going to be able to find it at the Black Economic Alliance's Instagram page and their LinkedIn page. We're going to do a quick edit and then make sure that you have a tight conversation that you can not only watch yourself, but share with others. As we close, listen, my background looks a little different because I pulled a couple items down. These are a couple of my treasures. I just wanted to use them to close real quick. This is a baseball that's signed by brother Hank Aaron, one of my personal heroes. And I just want to read a quote from him as we close. It says, "I have always felt that no matter where you come from, you should have the chance to be the best you can be. My hope is that we can continue to open doors and provide opportunities for those who come after us so that they can feel free to chase their dreams." Isn't that what we want as Black men? Just the opportunity to chase our dreams. And then a final quote. This is another one of my treasures, The Fire Next Time, signed by James Baldwin. This is really something that I cherish. And our great mind and activist and author James Baldwin wrote in The Fire Next Time, "Everything now we must assume is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. If we do not falter in our duty now, we may be able, just a handful that we are, to end this nightmare and achieve for our country and change the history of the world." Black men, in just a few days, you can literally change the course of this country and indeed the world. The power is in your hands. And now, thanks to the Black Economic Alliance, the information is in your hands. Let's make informed and wise decisions and bring another brother along with us. Check out everything you need to vote at bit.ly/vote 2024 election. Scan the QR code. Follow the Black Economic Alliance, Instagram and LinkedIn to get this video. And let's indeed be the force that changes the world. Thank you all and have a great night.